Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Media Magpie Podcast. Now, in today's episode, as I reveal all the time, or as I reveal before all my episodes on my socials, this episode, I'm going to be talking about Fight Club. Now, Fight Club is a movie that was on my list for a long time, and I actually only saw it this year. So, I actually only saw it this year in April, the 1st of April. It was just after I'd seen Kung Fu Panda 4 in the cinemas. I went to go see Kung Fu Panda 4 because I thought, fuck it, I've seen the others, I want to see this one too. I didn't really like Kung Fu Panda 4, and without going into detail why I didn't like it, because we're not talking about that, I just didn't like it compared to the rest. But after coming home from the cinemas, I thought, I want to watch a movie. But I didn't want to watch a movie that I'd already seen. I wanted to watch a new movie. And then I remembered, Fight Club's on my list. So I was like, why not? I'm going to watch Fight Club. And I actually really enjoyed it. To say, before we get into this, I enjoyed it. I actually really enjoyed it. So, and I'm not going to get into why I enjoyed it yet, because we're going to talk about it. So, to get into details of what Fight Club is a movie that was made in 1999. And it was directed by David Finch. And the movie stars Brad Pitt, Edward Norton, and Ellen Bonham Carter. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Brad Pitt. Everyone's seen him. He's been in Bullet Train, some other movies that I can't think off the top of my head. Bullet Train, I love Bullet Train. Great movie. Edward Norton, he was actually the original Hulk. He was one of the original Hulk. So that's a little fun fact for you if you didn't know that. And he was also in Sausage Party, which was an weird animated movie which I remember watching during high school after school with my mates. Anyway, funny story. And then Helen Bonham Carter, she is Bellatrix Lestrange in the Harry Potter series movies. So that's another little fun fact. And then another person in the movie as well, another character, is Jared Leto. He's in it, which is quite cool. And then a bunch of other actors. But basically, to get into context of the movie, I'll give you sort of the plot of what the movie's about. So the movie is about this guy, which we don't know his name, he's called the narrator. And he sort of struggles with insomnia. And it makes, affects his, job and his lifestyle. And then, he's trying to find ways to sort of sleep and, help himself, because he needs sleep, right? It's getting to the point where he even says in the movie that there's times where it doesn't feel like he doesn't know when he's awake or asleep. It's hard to tell. And then he sort of finds solace, or temporary solace, in actually going to support groups. And, pretending that he's sick and everything and getting support from them. And that somehow weirdly fixes insomnia. But then someone comes in, spoiler alert, someone comes in, the girl on that, her name is Marla. She comes in, also pretends to be a faker in these support groups. And then his insomnia's back. And then from there, he's on a flight back from some work thing. And then he runs into this soap maker guy. And then they spark a connection. Something happens. His apartment blows up. And then they're starting this underground fight club. And that sort of fixes insomnia as well. And that's why the movie's called Fight Club. Because it's sort of him and this guy, Tyler Durden. That's the guy's name. So the narrator, we don't know who he is, played by Edward Norton. And then Tyler Durden, which is played by Brad Pitt. Love Brad Pitt. What an actor. And they sort of create this fight club. And it sort of spirals out of control when shit happens. And yeah. So we're going to talk about that. And it was an interesting plot. I really loved it. And the movie was just insane. Like, I will say one thing before I get into it. The movie, for at least me, the movie really makes you think. And it really made me question a lot of things. Like, I will say this much. It made me question a lot. Especially if, I will say, from the get-go, questioned if Tyler Durden was even real. Like, there was a lot of weird stuff happening. And before getting into what, happens at the end, well, I'm going to give you some more information. But it's a very interesting movie. It makes you question a lot of things. And I like it. It was really, again, Amazing movie. It is up there on my top of my list at the moment. So as I said, yeah, the narrator struggles with insomnia, and then he makes this fight club. So the interesting thing about this movie is that Fight Club was sort of a coming age film, and that it was sort of, as the director describes it, it was for people in their 30s. And and Finch sort of described that the narrator is an everyman's character, and then, you know, the character in the script identifies Jack, but he's left unnamed. So in the script there is a name Jack, but he's left unnameless. So that's interesting. So they did have sort of a name down there, but they didn't put it there. They didn't say in the movie at all, because they didn't say his name. We only know him as the narrator, because while we're watching the movie, we hear Edward Norton talking over as if he's narrating his own life while we're watching him go through it. Hence the name, the narrator. That makes sense. So Tyler Durden comes into his life and sort of opens this experience. I mean, he's lost a home. Tyler Durden takes him in, and they sort of become best buds and everything. And then they create this spark of an idea to make this fight club. And they get these people to come along and do this fighting, and they do fights and everything. And then the one line that everyone knows from the movie is, first rule of Fight Club is, don't ever talk about Fight Club, which I'm talking about it. Sorry, broke the rule. But it's interesting. And then obviously later on down the track, there's more and more members. And then Tyler Durden's like, clearly none of you were paying attention to the rules, because there's more people here, so you clearly talked about it. And then it's sort of, you know, as much as there's all the fighting and, you know, they're having their enjoyment of doing all the fight stuff, it gets to a point where they actually do crimes. They go out of just fighting and just doing a fight club under, like, in a basement somewhere. They actually do crimes. They start this thing called Project Mayhem, and it gets bizarre. And as sort of described here, the violence of Fight Club serves as not to promote or glorify combat, but for participants to express feelings in a society where they are otherwise numb. The fights represent a resistance to the impulse to be cooned in society. So basically, it was how they explained in the movie is that they weren't just fighting for the sake of, you know, showing off combat and the blood and the gore. They were doing it to express that it was sort of their way of breaking free and expressing themselves. It was a way of expression. Like the Fight Club was a way to show their expression, which is interesting. And I guess, you know, each to their own, right, for your way of expression, but that's the way that they explained it. And it's, as I said, it's a movie that really makes you think, and you question a lot of things. And again, Marla Singh, Helen Bonham Carter's character, is in this movie a bit, and as well, she does go to their place and has sex with Tyler Durden, which then the narrator hears from above, and he's listening in, and he's like, yeah. And she's like, that's the best and then she goes after the next day, that's like the best sex I've ever had since high school or something. But yeah, so that is sort of the base of the movie. We'll get more into it, but now let's go into sort of production about it. So the budget for the movie was about $63 to $65 million, which is pretty insane. That's probably standard for a budget. That's probably small for unless the big budget movies, but that's a decent budget. And there was makeup effects, realistic fight choreography. So they had to learn how to do fighting. They did choreography for fighting. They had to learn how to do martial arts and stuff. So the actors were required to go full out to make sure it was realistic and have the wind knocked out of them. And even apparently, there was designs of extra ear. One of the makeup artists designed an extra ear to have, fall off. And makeup artists devised 2 methods to create sweat on cue: spraying mineral water over a coat of Vaseline and using the unadulterated water for wet sweat. Which is interesting. So yeah, they had ways to make sweat and make them look like they were sweating when they were fighting and everything. which is very interesting, and I quite like. And another thing as well, the house that Tyler Durden and Winona stayed in, it was sort of looked like an abandoned sort of weird house that they sort of found. And the exterior of Tyler Durden's house was built in Wyomington, California, but the interior for it was actually on a sound stage at the studio's location. The interior was given a decayed look to illustrate the destructed world of the characters. So this is the reason why they live in that place. Their world's sort of broken down. The narrator, he had a lot of shit in his house before it went up to flames. He had a lot of shit in his house. He bought a lot of stuff. And then that shit goes on fire, goes onto flames. And another thing I would like to know, which, again, I look back on, I'm like, how did I not know that this was the case? But something that happens early on is that Tyler Durden rings the phone, payphones. He rings it, which usually you can't ring payphones. So that's just an interesting one, something I want to say about the payphone. So basically, yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff about this movie. A lot of interesting stuff. And into the sort of music and score, they actually wanted to get, what was it? They wanted to get Radiohead, actually. They pursued Radiohead. The director pursued Radiohead. But the singer at the time declined as he was recovering from the stresses of promoting OK Computer. So instead, they ended up getting the Dust Brothers, which the duo of the Dust Brothers, who created a sort of postmodern score encompassing drum loops, electronic scratches, and computerized samples. So, as it says here, Finch wanted to break new grounds with everything about the movie, and a non-traditional score helped achieve that. The climax and end credits featured the song "Where Is My Mind" by Pixies. Now, let's sort of get into that end, the end bit, because I've sort of explained the whole thing. So going back to the story, yeah, they make this Project Mayhem thing where they're going to do all these crazy crimes, and then they set up bombs all around the city, which they're going to blow up the bank, and they're going to blow up stuff, and it's all timed. And it's all crazy, and then Tyler Durden goes missing for some odd reason. He goes missing. So then the narrator goes looking for him. And then he talks to the people about Fight Club. They go, hey, what's up? And then he goes, I'm looking for Tyler Durden. Have you seen him? He's like, is this a test? Are you testing me? All right, yeah. And then as he slowly starts to get more events to look for Tyler Durden, he runs into more of the crew for Fight Club. And they said, where's Tyler Durden? Have you seen him? He's like, where? And they're confused. But then they're also like, we were told you were going to say that. He's like, stop this now. Stop what you're doing with all this crime stuff. He said you would say that. Tyler Durden, you'd say that. He wants us to stop. He doesn't want it. He told us not to stop it, even though you said you would say that. And then by the end of it, he calls Marla Singh. And Marla Singh says, she goes, you're Tyler Durden. She goes, Tyler Durden. And then something that the narrator realizes is Tyler Durden's not real. It's him all along. So all the times he saw Tyler Durden talking to the people in the Fight Club, having sex with Marla, and doing all this crazy shit, he saw it as a third person perspective. But in actuality, it was actually him. And I feel like the movie did it so well, at least for me, the movie did it so well that it doesn't really give it away straight away. I mean, realistically, if you're smart enough, you should have seen it. And I guess, I don't know, I feel like I should have seen it. But it sort of hints at it. And maybe, look, movies, stuff could happen, right? It's a movie. You know, things can happen. But there's hints at it, and there's just sort of weird things that happen during the movie that made me question, this is interesting. What's happening here? And I did question a couple times. I did question, nah, I have a weird sense that Tyler Durden's not real. But the movie does it so well that it makes you, again, it pushes you and says, no, that he is real. And then I was like, oh, okay, it's fine. They're definitely two separate people. But then by the end of it, it's like, that's broken. It's like, no, they're not two separate people. They're one person. And then he pops up again. And then Tyler Durden pops up in the room that when he gets the call from Marla Singh while he's calling her, and he says, yep, so you figured it out now, man. I am you. You've figured it out. And then he's sort of trying to stop this whole thing, and he's shooting, Tyler Durden in, and he's like, you're shooting your imaginary friend, what are you doing? And then by the end of it, he shoots himself in the mouth. And basically, it doesn't kill him, but he basically, by shooting himself, kills the version of Tyler Durden. And by the end of it, you see him looking, and he's with Marla Singh, and boom, the explosions happen. And that's when Where Is My Mind by the Pixies plays. So it's, I don't know, it's an amazing movie. Like, honestly, I've only actually watched it once. I was going to watch it again before talking about it on the podcast, but I don't know, it's sort of one of those movies that I feel like once you know the ending for it, you sort of can't watch it again. I still do want to watch it again to see what I feel about it while watching it for a second time. I just sort of was like, I don't feel in the mood to watch it. Again, I feel like it's one of those movies, if you do know the ending, it's a bit tricky. You're like, wow, can I really watch this again and still enjoy it? But yeah, so it's, again, one of those movies that is fucking up there on my list. Such a good movie. But yeah, in regards to sort of the release of the movie, it actually was, initially criticized a lot when it first came out. People didn't like this movie. People felt this movie was not all that good. And in regards to money-wise, it still made profit, but it didn't actually, make as much money as the studio wanted it to make. So it was a flop for them at the end of the day. But again, as I said, initially it received criticism, but then after the box office performance, it got its later success, and now people sort of deem it the cult classic that it is and love it. And I love it. Like, I'm kind of upset that I only realistically watched it this year. That's how late I watched it. But look, I'm here now. I've watched it. Thank God. And interesting things about Fight Club as well, about the awards that it got. So Fight Club was nominated for the 2000 Academic Awards for Best Sound Editing, but it lost to The Matrix, which is fair enough. Again, The Matrix was such an amazing movie. That's like a fair call. But it lost to that. At least it was nominated, though. And then Bonham Carter won the 2000 Empire Award for Best British Actress, which is cool. So that's good. And then it was also nominated Fight Club for Best Film, Best Director, and Best Actor for Edward Norton, and Best Editing and Best Adapted Screenplay. The film won none of the awards, but at least it was, nominated for a lot of them. And again, soundtrack was nominated for a Brit Award, but lost to Notting Hill. So it was nominated for a lot of awards, but didn't win a lot of them. But again, that being said, nominated for those types of awards is pretty insane in itself. So that's pretty good. Now, I guess an interesting thought that I had about this movie as well is that, again, I still couldn't believe when at the end that, I thought Tyler Durden was a completely different person. And it blew my mind when I found out they were the same person. Because as well, something that happens during the movie is you actually do see, even before the narrator meets Tyler Durden, you actually do see like a quick flash of Tyler Durden and his look. So even looking back at that, it just made sense that he was all in his head and then he was starting to come through. But it just didn't crack. Like, I didn't know it. I felt like the movie did it, again, as I said, really well, that I just didn't see it. But I think, yeah, props to the movie. It was just that, it just did it that well. So, anyway, interesting fun facts about the movie is that the ending of the movie and the ending of the book are actually slightly different, which, I mean, that makes sense, Well, it doesn't make sense. They try to keep the endings maybe the same. They change a couple other things, but the endings are slightly different in the movie and the book. So, it turns out Tyler doesn't exist. He's personified by the unnamed protagonist. Yep. Da-da-da-da. So, in the book, the narrator ends up in a mental institution, whilst in the movie, he just shoots himself and he watches stuff explode. Movie ends. But it makes sense. I mean, for him to go so crazy that he made someone up and do all this stuff, it makes sense that he would go into a mental institution. So that's an interesting ending for the book. And then, as I said, the budget was $63 million for the movie. But again, as I said, it was considered a box office flop because it only earned $100 million, which is profit. But again, the studio didn't expect it. So that sucked for the studio wise. And yeah, it just, for them, was a bit of a flop. And then another interesting fact is that actually when it came out on Blu-ray, the funny thing about it is that the Blu-ray released a fake out. So, because the whole rule of you don't talk about Fight Club, the Fight Club wanted to have that at-home experience. So when the Blu-ray was released for the 10th anniversary of the film, when you would load it up, it would have Drew Barrymore's romantic comedy Never Been Kissed. So, which was just included as sort of a goof in the actual, DVD. Which Finch did get the okay from Barrymore to use the film for the joke to have the screen. It was like a menu for Never Been Kissed, which is so interesting and so bizarre. So that's very cool. But yeah, again, as I have stated a couple times now, this movie is just exceptional, and it really bends your mind and really makes you think. And again, I don't know, I do want to watch it again. I really do want to watch it again, and I should. And if you haven't watched this movie, I mean, I would hope you would have watched this movie by now. I did say on my Instagram, make sure you watch the movie before you listen to this episode. But if you haven't watched the movie, well, spoilers. But it's such a good movie. Recommend watching it. But I assume you wouldn't be here if you haven't watched it. So, yeah, I guess that's sort of the whole gist of the movie. It's one of those movies that I feel like, again, one and done. Well, look, I'm going to try and watch it again. I do want to watch it again. Anyway, thank you all for listening to my episode. I hope that you all enjoyed and that you share, maybe leave a comment, and just tell me what your thoughts maybe were on Fight Club. I want to hear your guys' opinions. As much as I like sharing what I like to talk about, I like to hear other people's opinions too. So thank you all for listening and all watching. And yeah, I'll see ya.